Today, I will tell you about a Thanksgiving no one at my family table will ever forget. My daughter gifted her mother-in-law a Lexus worth $80,000 with cheers and champagne. My gift? A wrinkled scarf with $5 stuffed in the pocket. And the next morning, the Thanksgiving gift I left on their doorstep made him scream nonstop. If you enjoy stories like this, remember to like, subscribe, and stay close for more Grandma Life stories, where every chapter is about love, betrayal, and lessons that cut deep. My name is Kathleen. I am 70 years old, a widow with silver hair tied neatly at the back, and a cardigan that has seen too many winters. That day began like any other holiday. I cooked through the morning, prepared the turkey, and set the table with care. My late husband Tom would have laughed at how much energy I put into keeping traditions alive. But for me, Thanksgiving had always been about family, about gathering under one roof. I thought that was still true. By mid-afternoon, the house was filled with the smell of roasted turkey and sweet potatoes, the sound of glasses clinking, and laughter spilling from the living room. Kayla, my only daughter, was glowing with excitement. Her husband David kept checking his phone as though waiting for something grand. Patricia, David's mother, had joined us too, dressed in a fur-trimmed coat, her silver hair styled to perfection, her smile wide and expectant. Then the moment arrived. David led Patricia outside into the crisp November air. Kayla followed, her eyes sparkling as if she were the one receiving the surprise. The rest of us trailed behind, my steps slower but steady. There, parked in the driveway, stood a brand-new Lexus. The car gleamed under the weak winter sun, a giant golden bow tied across the hood. For a moment, it looked like something out of a commercial, too glossy, too perfect, almost unreal. Kayla clapped her hands, and David popped open a bottle of champagne. Cheers erupted. Patricia gasped, covering her mouth with trembling fingers, tears rolling down her cheeks. She turned to her son and daughter-in-law, pulling them into her arms. Cameras flashed, selfies were taken. Neighbors even peeked out of their windows to see what the commotion was about. I stood back, my hands tucked inside my cardigan, watching, always watching. My daughter's voice rang loud across the yard, proud and playful. She said, "Mom, we wanted you to know how much you mean to us. You deserve the very best." She handed Patricia the keys. Patricia looked radiant, her hand pressing against her chest as though she had been handed not just a car, but the very symbol of triumph. She kissed both Kayla and David on the cheeks, whispering thank yous that sounded like a queen receiving her crown. I noticed something in Kayla's eyes then, a flicker of devotion that once belonged to me. It was now turned elsewhere toward another mother. I told myself to stay calm, to smile, to not ruin the moment. I thought I had braced myself for what would come next, but I had not. When the noise died down, when the glasses were emptied and the photos taken, Kayla turned to me. She carried a small box in her hand. "For you, Mom," she said. Her voice was casual, almost hurried. I opened it slowly. Inside lay a scarf, wrinkled, thin, something that looked pulled from the bottom of a drawer. Tucked into its folds was a $5 bill. I stared at it, not because of its value, but because of what it symbolized. Kayla giggled nervously. "It's symbolic, Mom. You always taught me to save." I forced a smile, though my lips trembled. "Of course, dear. Thank you." My tone was steady, polite. My eyes, however, dropped to the ground, heavy with the weight of silence. The contrast was almost cruel. Patricia had been gifted a Lexus worth $80,000, a celebration fit for royalty. And me? I was handed $5 hidden inside a wrinkled scarf, as if my decades of sacrifice and devotion had shrunk to the price of a fast food meal. The crowd moved back inside, carrying glasses and chatter. Kayla hooked her arm around Patricia's. David walked ahead with the car keys jingling in his pocket. I lingered on the doorstep for a moment longer, letting the cold air bite into my skin. Inside, laughter resumed. Stories flowed, wine bottles uncorked, but I no longer heard them. I sat quietly at the corner of the table, my plate untouched, the scarf folded neatly beside me, the $5 tucked under it like an unspoken insult. No one noticed my silence. No one asked how I felt. To them, I was background, like the candles on the mantel or the ticking clock in the hall. Only the clock seemed to understand, each tick landing heavy in my chest. It was in that moment that something within me hardened. I realized my daughter no longer saw me as her anchor, her safe place. She had replaced me, not with malice but with negligence. Neglect can wound more deeply than hatred, and Patricia, with her polished smile and perfect timing, had stepped into the role I once held. As the evening went on, I told myself again and again, stay calm, smile, pretend. That is what mothers do. But deep inside, a quiet resolve began to take shape. I would not let this insult define me, nor would I let my silence be mistaken for weakness. And so, while Patricia admired her new Lexus, while Kayla and David toasted their generosity, I folded the scarf, slipped the $5 back inside, and placed it gently into my cardigan pocket. I knew this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Because Thanksgiving, a holiday meant to honor gratitude and family, had revealed a painful truth. I was not cherished, not even respected, but I also knew something my daughter had forgotten. The quietest person at the table often holds the sharpest memory. I looked across the table, watching Patricia bask in her triumph. She smiled, thinking she had won something permanent. But I knew otherwise. Life has a way of balancing accounts, and the bill would come due sooner than she imagined. That night, as I cleared plates and gathered the leftovers, I touched the scarf once more. Cold fabric against my palm, a reminder of how far a mother's love can be taken for granted. The roar of the Lexus engine thundered again outside, as though David wanted the whole neighborhood to know what he had given his mother-in-law. Kayla's laughter rose above the sound, high and sharp, the kind of laughter that carries pride more than joy. Patricia's voice followed, warm and triumphant, as she praised the smooth ride of her brand-new gift. Every sound cut through the walls like a blade. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the sink full of soapy water, the clink of plates in my hands the only rhythm that kept me steady. The smell of roasted turkey and cranberry sauce lingered in the air, but no one was inside to notice. They had all rushed outdoors to celebrate the Lexus, leaving me behind as if I were an afterthought, the quiet servant in my own home. My hands dipped into the warm water, scrubbing each dish with care. It was not carelessness that made me slow, but a deliberate attempt to focus my mind. I could not drown out the voices outside, but I could choose how I reacted to them. On the counter beside me sat the wrinkled scarf Kayla had handed me. It looked even sadder under the kitchen light than it had in the box. A scarf that might have once been soft now felt stiff, the fibers tired and worn. Inside its folds, I had placed the $5 bill she thought was meaningful. My hand trembled slightly as I touched it. Not because I was weak, but because insult cuts differently when it comes from your own blood. I held the scarf up, staring at the threads as if they could explain the message behind the gift. Kayla's words echoed in my head. "It's symbolic, Mom. You always taught me to save." Symbolic, yes. But symbols carry weight, and this one carried nothing but disregard. $5 tucked into a scarf that should have never been gifted to anyone. This was not love. It was obligation, stripped bare of respect. From outside, the voices grew louder. Champagne corks popped. Patricia called out, "It's the best Thanksgiving gift I've ever received." The cheer that followed was deafening. I placed the scarf down firmly on the counter, flattening the fabric with both hands. I was not going to cry over cloth and $5. No, I would not give them that power. Instead, I let my memory take me back, just for a moment. Tom, my husband, long gone now, once stood in this very kitchen while Kayla sat doing her homework at the table. He leaned against the doorway, his eyes on me, his voice calm. "One day, Kayla will realize who truly stands for her," he said. He believed it. He believed in the invisible threads between mother and daughter, threads stronger than money or gifts. I wanted to believe too, but tonight, I felt those threads had frayed close to breaking. The sound of the Lexus revving pulled me back, I gripped a glass tighter than I should have, my knuckles whitening. "Enough," I muttered under my breath. I would not sit quietly and be erased from my own family. Every plate I washed, every dish I dried became a declaration. I was still here. I had raised Kayla with my own hands. I had endured the long nights after Tom's death, holding the family together. No Lexus, no golden bow, no show of wealth could erase decades of sacrifice. Footsteps rushed past the window. Kayla's voice rang, filled with excitement. "Patricia, let's take it for a longer drive tomorrow." I felt my jaw tighten. My daughter was planning her tomorrow without a thought of me. Not a word about the meal I had cooked, the table I had set, the years I had given her. The Lexus was the sun now, and they revolved around it, leaving me in the shadows. I set the last plate on the drying rack and turned off the faucet. The kitchen fell silent, save for the muffled joy outside. I looked again at the scarf and the $5 bill. They sat like proof, like evidence in a trial waiting to be judged. I folded the scarf carefully, slid the bill back inside, and placed it in the drawer beside the sink. My hands pressed against the drawer handle, steady and strong. That drawer, filled with recipes and memories of Tom, now held the insult that would fuel me. I whispered, my voice firm, "They think this is all I'm worth. They're wrong." The noise outside swelled once more, but this time it did not pierce me. It ignited me. Patricia could laugh, David could boast, Kayla could pretend, but I had seen the truth. They had forgotten who I was. They had mistaken my silence for surrender. I dried my hands on a towel and stood straighter than I had in years. The kitchen light reflected in the window, catching my eyes, and what I saw was not defeat. It was readiness. They could not hear me now, but they would soon. The scarf and $5 were not the end. They were the spark. When I stepped back from the counter, I felt the weight of loneliness. Yes, but beneath it pulsed something far more powerful. Purpose. They had pushed me aside, but I would make sure they never forgot me again. Patricia stepped back into the house, her fur coat draped around her shoulders, the scent of her perfume filling the air before she even spoke. Her cheeks glowed, her lips curved in a smile that demanded attention. She moved through the living room as if the house belonged to her, her eyes darting to Kayla and David with approval, her hand reaching out to touch Kayla's arm. "You two are remarkable," she said, her voice thick with pride. "Alexis, such a generous, perfect gift." Kayla blushed under the praise, while David puffed up like a man who had finally earned his mother's approval. I sat near the corner of the dining table, quiet, my hands resting in my lap. Patricia glanced at me briefly, her smile tightening for a second before she turned back to Kayla. The message was clear. She had the spotlight, and she would not share it. As I watched, memory pulled me backward. After Tom passed, life became heavier, lonelier. Kayla was still finding her footing. David's business was collapsing, and money was a constant shadow. That was when Patricia began to appear, always at the right time, always with the right solution. She offered loans when the bills piled up. She bought clothes for the children when Kayla said she couldn't afford Christmas presents. She paid for little extras that made her seem like a savior. Kayla, desperate and grateful, welcomed her in. At first, I told myself not to be jealous. Patricia had resources I didn't. If she helped Kayla, that was good for my daughter and grandchildren, but the help came with a cost, though no one saw it at first. Patricia became the hero in every story Kayla told. The late-night calls for advice went to her. The whispered worries about money were shared with her. I was reduced to the background, the one they visited out of duty, not need. Now, standing in my living room with her fur coat and perfect smile, Patricia acted like she had earned the right to be the matriarch of my family. She raised her glass, her voice carrying across the room. "This is what family looks like, supporting one another, celebrating each other's success." She looked at Kayla with eyes full of affection, then let her gaze slide to me. Her lips curled into a smile, too sweet to be real. As she passed by me on her way to the kitchen, her words dropped like ice. "Family isn't about blood, Kathleen. It's about presence." She didn't wait for my reply. She didn't even look back. She knew what she had said, and she wanted me to hear it. I clenched my hands together under the table, my nails pressing into my palms. My first instinct was to rise, to confront her, to strip the mask from her face. But I stayed still. I knew better than to fight her in that moment. Patricia thrived on public performance, on turning the room to her side. If I spoke, if I snapped, she would twist it into proof that I was bitter, jealous, small. Instead, I studied her. Every gesture, every smile, every word. Patricia was not careless. She was calculated. She had taken her own pain, widowed young, left with money but no one to share it with, and transformed it into control. Helping Kayla gave her purpose. Becoming the center of attention gave her the validation she craved. And stealing the loyalty of my daughter gave her power she had not earned. Kayla followed her into the kitchen, her voice low and affectionate. "Patricia, I don't know what we'd do without you." I heard Patricia's laugh, light and victorious. "That's what family is for, dear." The words were sweet, but they cut through me sharper than any insult. I remembered nights when Kayla was little, when she would cling to me after a nightmare, whispering, "Mom, don't let go." I never did. I held her through storms, through sickness, through the grief of losing Tom. Yet now, in her adult years, it was Patricia she leaned on, Patricia she thanked, Patricia she praised. I rose from my chair and stepped quietly toward the doorway, unseen. Patricia stood with her back to me, still glowing under Kayla's admiration. She reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from Kayla's face like a mother would. The sight struck me like a blow. Patricia wasn't just stepping into the role of helper. She was taking the role of mother. The scarf and $5 burned in my memory. The message was clear. I had been replaced. But replacement does not erase truth. I was Kayla's mother, bound to her by more than presence, bound by sacrifice, history, and love that could not be bought with cars or fur coats. I stepped back into the dining room, my expression calm though my heart raced. Patricia and Kayla's voices carried behind me, their laughter weaving together. David bragged to a cousin about the Lexus, while Patricia's name was lifted like a banner. They thought this was her victory. They thought she had won. But as I sat again at the table, I repeated her words in my head. Family isn't about blood. It's about presence. She believed that gave her the right to take my place. She believed her presence outweighed my blood. She was wrong. Presence can be staged. Blood cannot be rewritten. I pressed my palms against the table, firm and steady. Patricia had revealed herself, even if no one else saw it yet. She wanted power. She wanted my daughter. She wanted to erase me without ever saying the words out loud. And she thought her wealth, her generosity, her timing gave her the strength to do it. I whispered under my breath, unheard by anyone but myself. "I see you, Patricia, and I will not let you win." The kitchen filled again with Patricia's laughter, Kayla's voice soft with gratitude. I sat in the silence of my corner, outwardly calm, inwardly resolute. Patricia might have stolen the moment, but I would not let her steal the future. David sat across from me at the dining table later that night, his hands fidgeting with the stem of his wineglass. The room was quieter now. Patricia had taken Kayla outside again, still riding the high of her extravagant gift. For the first time all evening, I had David to myself. His shoulders were tense, his eyes restless. I studied him in silence for a moment, then asked, "How are things with work, David?" He shifted, cleared his throat, and forced a smile. "Things are fine, Kathleen. Better, actually. We're rebuilding." His words were smooth, but the crack in his voice betrayed him. I knew enough about business to recognize a man drowning. In the back of my mind, I recalled the whispers I had overheard weeks before when Kayla thought I was out of earshot. Calls from the bank, reminders about unpaid loans, the weight in her voice when she asked David if they would lose the house. I didn't confront them then, but I carried the truth with me. Tonight, I wanted to hear it from him. I leaned forward, my tone sharper. "Be careful with debts, David. They don't forgive easily." His head snapped up, the mask of politeness falling away. He gave a short, bitter laugh. "Patricia understands finances you wouldn't." The words cut like a blade, quick and dismissive. He sipped his wine without meeting my eyes, as though the conversation were already over. I sat back, my chest tightening, but I refused to let him see me flinch. His choice of words said everything. Patricia wasn't just his rescuer, she was his shield, his authority, the one he trusted over me. The truth spilled into my mind, piecing together what I had observed. David had once tried to start his own construction company, taking out loans he thought he could repay quickly. But contracts fell through, clients backed out, and the recession chewed through his savings. Soon the debts towered above him. The banks circled like vultures, ready to take everything. Kayla, caught in the middle, had begged Patricia for help. Patricia swooped in, paying off just enough to keep their home and reputation intact. Not all, just enough. She knew how to bind people to her. By saving him partially, she made sure he never forgot who had thrown him a lifeline. David was no longer just her son, he was her debtor. Gratitude chained him tighter than any legal document. I remembered one evening months ago when I came by to drop off groceries. David had been pacing the living room, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and desperate. "Please, just extend the deadline. We'll have it next month. I promise." His face had been pale, his hand trembling. When he hung up and saw me, he smiled too quickly. "Everything's fine, Kathleen. Just business." But I had seen the fear. Now, as he sat before me, trying to hide behind Patricia's shadow, I saw a man torn in two. Part of him wanted to believe he could rise again. The other part knew he was too far gone without her money. I asked quietly, "And when the debts return, will Patricia save you again?" His jaw tightened. He looked at me, finally meeting my eyes, and there it was. Shame. He whispered, almost too low to hear, "She already has." The admission hung between us. For a second I felt pity. David was not an evil man. He was weak, and weakness is dangerous when it hides behind pride. Patricia fed that weakness, nurturing it so she could keep him loyal. Kayla burst back into the room with Patricia trailing close, laughing about tomorrow's test drive. David straightened immediately, plastering on a grin. Patricia touched his shoulder and said warmly, "Everything all right, dear?" David nodded quickly. "Perfect. Everything's perfect." But I saw the flicker in his eyes. He was a man trapped in a debt he could never fully repay, not with money, not with loyalty, not even with his dignity. And Patricia knew it. She leaned down, kissed his cheek, and whispered something that made his face flush. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. Her grip on him was absolute. As the evening went on, I sat quietly, piecing together the shape of their arrangement. David had sold more than his pride to Patricia. He had sold his independence. And Kayla, blinded by relief, praised Patricia for saving them. I understood then why my warning about debts had angered him so deeply. To admit I was right would mean admitting he had shackled himself to Patricia. It would mean admitting he had failed. Easier to insult me, easier to side with the woman who had written the check. When the guests began to leave, I stayed in the kitchen doorway, watching David slip Patricia's coat onto her shoulders. She kissed Kayla goodnight and told them both, "I'll always be here for you." The words sounded kind, but they were chains in disguise. David bowed his head slightly, like a man acknowledging his ruler. I clenched my fists. He might think his loyalty to Patricia was survival, but survival that strips a man of his honor is nothing more than slow destruction. He was bound to her, yes, but he didn't see the trap tightening around his neck. As they walked her to her car, I whispered to myself, "You've sold your freedom, David, and you don't even know the price yet." Kayla came back inside after seeing Patricia off, her cheeks still flushed with excitement. She carried herself differently these days, as if the weight of her loyalty had shifted to someone else. I watched her place the empty champagne glasses on the counter, humming to herself, and I knew this was my moment to ask. My voice was calm but sharp, each word deliberate. "Why such difference, Kayla?" She froze, her back still to me. For a long second she didn't answer. Then she turned slowly, eyes darting away before they settled on the floor. "Mom," she said softly. "Patricia, she's given us stability. You You can't understand." The words cut deeper than any insult Patricia could throw. My own daughter believed I could not understand stability when I had spent my life building it for her. I raised her through storms, through Tom's death, through nights when the cupboards were nearly empty, but her plate was always full. Yet she stood there, defending the woman who bought her favors with checks and luxury. I stepped closer, my hands resting firmly on the back of a chair. "Kayla, stability doesn't come from cars or fur coats. It comes from sacrifice. Do you remember who held you when you cried after Dad died? Do you remember who worked nights so you could finish college without a loan?" Her eyes flickered, guilt flashing across her face. But then she straightened, her chin lifting with a kind of pride that wasn't her own. "Mom, Patricia was there when David's company collapsed. She paid bills you couldn't. She gave us breathing room. You have to see that." I shook my head, steady, refusing to let emotion cloud my words. "What I see is you forgetting that love without conditions is worth more than any check. Patricia doesn't give without keeping score, and you know it." Kayla's lips trembled, but she pressed them together, fighting back her own doubts. "Maybe she keeps score, but at least she helps." "You can't. Not anymore." Her words hit me like a hammer. Not anymore, as if my value had expired, like spoiled milk left too long in the fridge. I felt the sting, but I refused to show weakness. I straightened, my tone sharper. "So, I am replaced? My worth reduced to a wrinkled scarf and $5 while she gets a Lexus?" Kayla's eyes widened, shame washing over her face. She whispered, "It wasn't meant to hurt you." I answered quickly, firmly, "But it did. And deep down, you know why." She looked away again, her fingers twisting nervously. For a moment, I saw the little girl she once was, caught between loyalty and love, too young to see the cost of her choices. But then she hardened, her jaw set. "Mom, I can't fight everyone. Patricia makes things easier. You make things harder." The honesty was brutal, and I felt my chest tighten. I thought of Tom's words again. One day, Kayla will realize who truly stands for her. But that day had not come. Tonight, she chose Patricia, and in choosing her, she cut me. I took a step back, breathing steady. "Easier is not always better, Kayla. Remember that. And remember this too. No one, not even Patricia, will love you more than I do. That doesn't vanish because I can't buy you a Lexus." Her eyes shone with unshed tears, but she didn't reply. She turned, grabbed the empty glasses, and moved toward the sink. Her silence was louder than shouting. It was the silence of distance, of a daughter pulling away from her mother to cling to someone else. I stood still, watching her shoulders stiffen. Part of me wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, to beg her to remember the years behind us. But another part knew begging would only push her further. So I swallowed the ache, letting my words hang in the air, sharp and unforgettable. That night, as she busied herself with small chores, I saw the fracture between us more clearly than ever. It was not just Patricia's influence. It was Kayla's choice to believe that wealth defined safety, that money defined love. She chose the path that glittered, even if it was lined with chains. And I chose silence, for now. The house had grown quieter after the excitement outside. The Lexus sat in the driveway like a shrine, its golden bow glimmering under the porch lights. Kayla and David hovered around Patricia, still praising her as if she had been crowned the Queen of Thanksgiving. I stayed behind in the kitchen, tidying the last of the dishes, when I noticed something that stopped me cold. On the edge of the kitchen table sat Patricia's handbag. It wasn't the kind of bag someone forgot by accident. Black leather, polished to a shine, with gold buckles that caught the light. Heavy, structured, the kind of bag that spoke of wealth and calculation. For a moment, I thought of carrying it to her, but curiosity pressed harder than courtesy. I hesitated, my fingers brushing the handle. A voice in my head whispered, "Leave it alone." But another, sharper voice pushed back. She had spoken to me like I was nothing, replaced in my own daughter's heart. She had strutted into my home wearing my daughter's affection like a trophy. And now her bag was here, unattended, daring me. I pulled it closer and unfastened the clasp. The sound was small, but in that silent kitchen it roared like thunder. Inside, neatly stacked, were bundles of cash, too much to be casual. My pulse quickened. Next to the money sat a worn folder. I opened it and froze. Bank statements, property deeds, papers that should have never left my possession. At the top was something that nearly made me drop the folder. A photocopy of Tom's retirement account, my husband's pension, the savings we had built together through decades of sacrifice, now sitting inside Patricia's bag. My breath caught, sharp and ragged. She had no right, no reason. And yet here it was, staring me in the face. I flipped through faster now, my hands unsteady, but my mind sharper than ever. Then I saw it. Our house deed. My home. The one Tom and I had poured every ounce of our lives into, reduced to a piece of paper stuffed into Patricia's handbag. My chest burned, fury rising like fire through my veins. I whispered under my breath, teeth clenched so tightly the words barely escaped. Why does she have these? The question echoed in the room, unanswered, but the answer was already forming in my mind. Patricia wasn't just generous. She wasn't just trying to play the hero. She was positioning herself, gathering leverage, collecting the very documents that tied me to stability. She wanted to own not just my daughter's loyalty, but my life's work. The weight of betrayal pressed on my chest. My daughter had handed me a wrinkled scarf and $5, but Patricia had walked into my kitchen with the blueprint of my entire existence. It wasn't generosity. It was theft disguised as kindness. I ran my hand over Tom's name printed across the pension copy. His voice whispered back to me from memory, steady and sure. One day, Kayla will realize who truly stands for her. I tightened my grip on the papers. If Tom were alive, he would never have allowed another woman to hold these documents. He would have seen the threat clearly. I would not let his faith in me be wasted. I placed everything back carefully, making sure the edges lined up exactly as I found them. I closed the bag, steadying my breath. The evidence was too powerful to expose recklessly. If I confronted Patricia now, she would twist it, turn Kayla and David against me, accuse me of snooping, of jealousy. I needed more than indignation. I needed proof, timing, and precision. Footsteps sounded in the hall. Kayla's laughter approached, Patricia's voice right behind. I slid the bag back onto the table exactly where it had been, my hands folded calmly in front of me, just as they entered the kitchen. Patricia's eyes flicked to the bag. For the smallest fraction of a second, her smile faltered. Then it returned, sweet and flawless. She scooped up the bag, her voice smooth. "Oh, there you are. I must have left this behind. How silly of me." I watched her grip tighten on the handle as she swung it over her arm. She glanced at me, her gaze sharp as a blade under the mask of her smile. She knew, and I knew. Something unspoken passed between us in that instant. A silent war had begun. Kayla didn't notice the exchange. She leaned against the counter, chatting about how tomorrow she and David would take Patricia for another drive in the Lexus. "It feels like a dream," she said, glowing. Patricia nodded, beaming, but her knuckles were still white where they clutched the bag. I stood still, calm on the surface, a storm underneath. I had seen enough. Patricia was no savior. She was a predator. And I would not sit by and let her strip me of my family and my legacy. That night, long after they left, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The faint smell of turkey lingered, the golden bow of the Lexus glimmered faintly through the window, but none of it mattered. My focus was razor-sharp now. Patricia had declared war without saying a word. She thought she could erase me, thought she could outplay me. I folded my hands, whispering to the quiet room, "You made a mistake, Patricia. You showed me your hand." The scarf and $5 sat on the counter, pathetic in comparison to the bag's contents. Yet together, they told the truth. Patricia wanted control. Kayla was blind. David was bound by debt. and I was the only one standing between my family and the woman who had slipped in like smoke. The night closed in around me, but I did not feel weak. I felt alive, sharper than I had in years. Patricia's bag had revealed more than papers. It had revealed the battlefield. Patricia's handbag had already shaken me with the documents I found, but what came next nearly stopped my heart. As I sat at the kitchen table, trying to process what I had seen, a sharp vibration rattled the leather. The sound was muffled but clear. The phone inside the bag was ringing with life of its own. For a split second, I thought of ignoring it, of letting the moment pass. But then the screen lit up, and my eyes locked on the words. One message, glowing against the black background. Ethan Chen. Mom, the police need answers. Call me. I froze, my breath trapped in my chest. Mom. Patricia had told Kayla countless times she was alone, a widow with no family left in the world. She had played the role of the tragic, solitary matriarch who had no one to love her. And yet here, right in front of me, was proof she had a son. Not just a son, someone tied to the police, someone entangled in something serious enough to demand answers. I whispered into the silence, my voice hard as stone. She lied. The screen dimmed, then lit up again with another buzz, another message from Ethan. They won't wait forever. You can't keep avoiding this. My pulse quickened. Patricia hadn't just lied about being alone. She was hiding something bigger, something dangerous. My mind raced through every conversation I'd ever heard her have, every story she told Kayla. She painted herself as a savior, as someone who gave freely because she had nothing else. No husband, no family, just money to fill the void. Kayla pitied her, loved her, leaned on her. But the truth was different. Patricia had blood. She had a son, and she had kept him buried like a secret no one was meant to find. The kitchen felt smaller, tighter, the walls pressing in. I remembered her words earlier that night, whispered as she brushed past me. Family isn't about blood, Kathleen. It's about presence. Now I understood. She dismissed blood because she was hiding her own. I imagined Ethan, his messages desperate, his tone urgent. Was he young? Was he grown? Did Kayla know him? Or had Patricia erased him from her story the way she tried to erase me? If the police were involved, this was more than estrangement. There was weight here, something Patricia was desperate to keep hidden. The front door creaked open, and I nearly leapt from my seat, shoving the bag back where it had been. Patricia's laughter floated in, Kayla trailing close behind. I kept my face calm, my hands folded in my lap. Patricia's eyes flicked toward the bag, sharp as a hawk. For the briefest second, I thought she knew. Then she smiled, that practiced, polished smile, and reached for it. "Thank goodness," she said lightly. "I thought I had left this behind." Her grip on the handle was tighter than necessary, her knuckles white. She pulled it close to her side like a shield. Kayla didn't notice. She was too busy rambling about how tomorrow they'd take the Lexus down the coast for a proper drive. Patricia cooed in approval, but I caught the tension in her voice, the quickness in her movements as she adjusted the strap of the bag. She had secrets to protect, and I had just seen the first crack in her armor. That night, long after they left, I sat again at the table, replaying the message in my mind. Mom, the police need answers. If Patricia had lied about something as basic as having a child, what else had she lied about? And why involve the police? I thought of Kayla's face earlier when she told me, "Patricia's given us stability. You can't understand." My daughter believed in Patricia's story because Patricia had built it carefully, brick by brick. But now I had seen the hole in the wall. Patricia was not who she claimed to be. She wasn't just manipulative. She was hiding an entire life. The fury inside me sharpened into something colder, more dangerous. I whispered to Tom's memory, steady and unflinching. "She has a son. She lied about everything, and I will use the truth to end this." The next morning, I sat by the window, watching the sun rise over the Lexus, parked like a monument in the driveway. Kayla stepped outside, waving to Patricia, who had returned earlier than expected. The bag was still strapped to her arm, clutched tightly, her eyes scanning the yard like a soldier guarding enemy lines. She smiled broadly when she spotted me in the window, but I saw the steel underneath. Behind that smile was fear. Fear of Ethan. Fear of police. Fear of truth. For the first time since Tom's death, I felt stronger than the woman who had stolen my daughter's loyalty. Patricia thought she held every card, but she had left one on the table for me to see. Her secret son, her lies, her unfinished battles with the law. She wasn't untouchable. She was vulnerable. Patricia arrived the next morning as if she owned the place. Her perfume hit the air before her heels struck the hardwood. A fur collar wrapped around her neck, her hair fixed to perfection. She placed her leather handbag on the counter like a claim marker, smiled as though she were doing me a kindness, and sat down across from me at the kitchen table. Her eyes flicked around my kitchen with open judgment. "Kathleen," she said in that syrupy tone of hers, "I've been thinking. That big house of yours is far too much. It's wasted on just one person. Don't you agree?" I lifted my teacup, letting the steam fog my glasses. "Wasted?" I asked, calm, even. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You rattle around in these empty rooms, alone, while Kayla and David struggle to build a future. It doesn't make sense. Why not let them take on the house, invest the money, and give yourself some peace?" I didn't answer right away. I watched her hand glide across the table, her manicured nails tapping against the wood as if she were already impatient for me to agree. Her words were dressed in silk, but I could feel the knife beneath. I said finally, "And where would you have me go?" She brightened, as if I had asked the perfect question. "Somewhere smaller, a condo near the city, no upkeep, no stress, a community with people your age maybe. You could enjoy bridge nights, yoga classes, maybe even travel. Doesn't that sound freeing?" I set my cup down carefully. "Freeing," I repeated, tasting the word like something bitter. She mistook my stillness for persuasion. She pressed harder. "Kathleen, this isn't about taking anything from you. It's about giving Kayla and David stability. Think of the children. They deserve security, a strong financial foundation. Isn't that what you want as a grandmother?" I studied her face. She smiled, but her eyes gleamed with hunger. She wanted my home, not for Kayla's children, not for my daughter, but for control. "And what about my memories?" I asked softly. Patricia gave a light laugh. "Memories aren't bricks and mortar. Memories live in the heart. Don't chain yourself to old walls. You can't hold on to the past forever." Her words hit me like cold water. Old walls. That house wasn't just walls. It was where Tom carried Kayla through the front door as a baby, where we decorated the tree every Christmas, where I nursed him through his final illness. And here was Patricia, dismissing all of it as disposable. I folded my hands on the table and kept my voice steady. "Perhaps you're right. I'll think about it." Her smile stretched wide, triumphant. She leaned over and patted my hand as though I were a child who had finally listened. "Good. I knew you'd see sense." Inside, I wanted to wrench my hand away. Instead, I sat still, letting her believe she had won something. Patricia stood, straightening her coat, and looked around my kitchen again. My kitchen, where I had cooked every Thanksgiving meal, where Kayla had once helped me bake cookies. Patricia looked at it like a showroom waiting to be cleared out. "You always wanted what's best for Kayla," she said sweetly. "Now you can prove it." Her words burned hotter than any insult. Prove it. As though 30 years of sacrifice, of late nights working, of paying tuition, of being there when no one else was, counted for nothing. Now I had to prove myself to Patricia. When she left, the silence rushed in heavy. I stayed seated, my hands gripping the edge of the table. For a moment, I could almost hear Tom's voice. "Stand tall, Kathleen. Don't let them push you." I walked through the house slowly after she left. My hand brushed the doorframe where Kayla's height had once been marked in pencil. I paused in the living room where Tom had sat in his chair, reading the newspaper with his glasses low on his nose. Patricia thought these walls were wasted space, but I knew better. They held the story of my life. As I reached the hallway, I stopped beneath Tom's portrait. His steady eyes looked down at me, silent but resolute. "She wants me gone, Tom," I whispered. "She thinks she can erase me, but she doesn't know me. Not really." Back in the kitchen, the table was still warm from where Patricia had rested her hand. I placed my own hand there, firm, solid, as though claiming it back. My jaw tightened. Patricia had revealed herself today. She wasn't satisfied with admiration or gifts. She wanted control, complete control over me, my daughter, and my home. She thought she could outwit me with soft words and false concern, but her arrogance had betrayed her. I whispered into the empty room, "You made a mistake, Patricia. You showed your hand too soon." That night, as I folded the wrinkled scarf back into the drawer with the $5 bill, it no longer looked like a cruel joke. It looked like a warning, a reminder of just how little they thought of me and how dangerous Patricia's influence had become. She thought I would bend. She thought I would yield the house, my life, everything, for the sake of appearing generous. But I had already decided. I would play along. I would nod, smile, pretend. But when the moment came, Patricia would learn what it meant to underestimate a woman like me. The house was quiet that night. The kind of quiet that presses against your chest and makes every thought louder. I sat in front of the fireplace, the flames low but steady, shadows flickering across the walls. On the small table beside me, I placed the wrinkled scarf and the $5 bill. Next to them, I set Tom's photograph, the frame worn from years of being handled. His familiar smile looked back at me, steady, calm, a reminder of everything I had already endured and survived. For a long moment, I stared at those objects, cheap fabric, a few crumpled bills, and the man who had been my anchor. My hands trembled at first, but then I pressed them flat against my knees, steadying myself. The sting of humiliation that scarf represented no longer weakened me. It sharpened me. I whispered to the photo, my voice low but firm. "They thought they broke me, Tom. They thought $5 was enough to make me small. But tomorrow I'll fight on my terms." The words tasted different as they left my lips. Not like a vow of desperation, but like a promise made in steel. I leaned closer to the fire, the heat brushing against my face, my eyes reflecting in the glass of Tom's frame. "You always told me to stand tall. You always said I had more strength than I believed. Well, I see it now. And I won't let Patricia win. Not over our daughter, not over our home, not over me." The flames crackled, the scarf catching the light. For a split second, I imagined tossing it into the fire, watching it burn until nothing was left but ash. But I stopped myself. No, this scarf was evidence, proof of how little they valued me, proof of what I had endured. It wasn't just a piece of fabric anymore. It was a weapon, a reminder I would use when the time came. I sat back in the chair and closed my eyes. The memories came uninvited. Kayla's laughter as a little girl, the way she once clung to me when she was scared of thunderstorms. Then her voice tonight, distant, apologetic, yet firm. "Patricia has given us stability. You can't understand." The ache of betrayal was sharp, but beneath it was something stronger. Resolve. I thought of David, his voice cutting me off when I had tried to warn him about debts. "Patricia understands finances. You wouldn't." I thought of Patricia herself, her words dripping poison. "You always wanted the best for Kayla. Now you can prove it." My fists clenched at my sides. They had underestimated me. They saw a 70-year-old woman, hair silver, shoulders smaller than before, heart heavy from loss. But what they didn't see was the iron beneath all that. The years of sacrifice, the nights I worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, the mornings I rose before dawn to make sure Kayla had shoes on her feet and hope in her eyes. Patricia thought she could erase all that with a smile and a Lexus bow. She thought she could buy my daughter's love with champagne and glitter, but she had made one mistake. She had forgotten who I was. I rose from my chair and paced slowly through the living room, my footsteps steady against the wooden floor. Every corner of this house carried my fingerprints, my labor, my memories. To Patricia, it was wasted space. To me, it was sacred ground. And tomorrow, I would not let her take it. I stopped at the mantel, tracing the edge of the family photos. Kayla in her graduation gown, Tom in his uniform, me holding Kayla as a baby, my face younger, but my eyes the same. I whispered again, firmer this time. They will not erase me. I returned to the chair and reached for a notepad. My hand hovered over the blank page before I began to write. Names, dates, numbers. Patricia's lies, David's debts, Kayla's dependence, the documents I had seen in Patricia's handbag, the messages from Ethan, every piece of the puzzle I could remember. My handwriting was sharp, deliberate, each stroke of the pen a step closer to the truth. As I wrote, the fear I had carried for weeks began to lift. In its place came clarity. Patricia wasn't invincible. Her empire of influence was built on secrets, manipulation, and half-truths. And now I had seen behind the curtain. I set the pen down and folded my notes carefully, sliding them under Tom's photo. "Tomorrow, Tom," I whispered. "I begin." The flames in the fireplace dipped lower, glowing embers casting a soft red light across the room. I didn't feel small anymore. I didn't feel humiliated. I felt ready. I picked up the scarf once more, ran my fingers across the wrinkles, then folded it neatly and placed the $5 bill on top. Not trash, not insult. Evidence, symbols of their arrogance. And I would carry them with me until the time was right. As midnight passed, the house grew colder, but I remained steady in my chair. My heart no longer trembled with sadness. It beat with determination. I spent the morning in silence, moving through the house with purpose. The scarf and the $5 bill were tucked away, the notes I had written hidden beneath Tom's picture. I was ready. Patricia wanted my house, wanted me displaced, and she thought I had no choice but to bow. But tonight, she would learn that I was not the woman she imagined. When Patricia called that afternoon, her voice dripped with anticipation. "So, Kathleen, have you thought about our little talk?" I kept my voice calm, almost agreeable. "Yes, Patricia, I think you may be right. Maybe it is time to sell. But if I'm going to do this, I'd like to meet your investment group. You said they would handle everything, yes?" There was the slightest pause on the line, a sharp intake of breath before she covered it with a smile I could hear through the receiver. "Of course. They'd be thrilled to meet you. I'll arrange something soon." "Tomorrow night," I said, not asking but deciding. "Tomorrow," she echoed quickly. "Perfect." When I hung up, I allowed myself a thin smile. Patricia thought I had finally surrendered. She didn't realize I had just set the trap. That evening, I opened my wardrobe and pulled out a thick knit sweater Tom had once loved, its wool heavy and warm. Inside, I pinned a small recorder, cheap, discreet, and reliable. My fingers lingered over the switch. With this, every word she said, every slip of her tongue, would be mine to keep. The next day came fast. Patricia arrived early, her heels striking the pavement with the rhythm of victory. She carried a leather folder stuffed with papers, the edges sticking out like broken teeth. Behind her smile was triumph, too wide, too bright, too false. "Are you ready?" she asked, her tone bubbling with false excitement. I nodded slowly. "As ready as I'll ever be." We sat at the dining room table. She laid out the documents with a flourish. "Here we are, contracts, agreements, estimates, all drafted by the investment team." I adjusted my sweater casually, pressing the recorder with a discreet touch. The red light blinked to life beneath the fabric. My heart beat steady, but my hands were calm. Patricia flipped through the papers, her voice smooth. "The deal is simple. You sign, the house is sold, and the funds will be directed toward Kayla and David's future. Of course, there will be some handling fees. Nothing unusual." I leaned forward, My voice mild. And who exactly are these investors? She smiled quickly, but it was strained. Oh, trusted associates, friends of mine who specialize in these things. You don't need to worry about names, Kathleen. That's the beauty of it. It's seamless. I let the silence linger before I answered, tilting my head as if thoughtful. Seamless, yes, but my Tom always told me, never sign without knowing who you're signing with. Surely you understand. Patricia's lips tightened before she forced another smile. Kathleen, dear, this isn't like those old-fashioned deals. You don't need names, just signatures. The recorder caught every word, every ounce of pressure she tried to apply. I asked again, softly but firmly, so there are no licensed agents? No legal representatives? Patricia leaned back, her voice dropping into something sharper. If you want your daughter's life to stay comfortable, you'll stop asking so many questions. You'll trust me. My heart beat harder, but my face stayed still. I let a hint of hesitation show in my eyes, just enough to feed her arrogance. I do want what's best for Kayla, but these papers, they don't have any official seals. Why is that? Her eyes flicked away for half a second, a tell I didn't miss. Because official seals take time. And time is something David doesn't have, you understand? The banks... She stopped herself, her face stiffening. There it was, the crack I needed. I leaned back, folding my hands. I see. This is about David's debts, isn't it? Her expression faltered. She quickly recovered, waving her hand. Every family has burdens. We solve them together. This is nothing but practical. I nodded, keeping my voice even. Practical. Inside, I was burning. She wasn't just after my house. She was covering David's failings, tying Kayla tighter to her side, and using me as the currency. Patricia slid the pen toward me. All it takes is your signature. I looked down at the pen, then back at her. My fingers brushed the scarf folded neatly in my lap, hidden from her sight. That insult, that mockery, had led me here. I picked up the pen, rolling it between my fingers. Tomorrow, I said finally. Her brow furrowed. Tomorrow? Yes, I said firmly. I'll sleep on it. If this is the right choice, one more night won't change that. And if it isn't, well, I'd rather not rush. She pressed her lips together, displeased but unwilling to show it. Very well, tomorrow. When she left, I slipped the recorder from my sweater, the tiny red light still glowing. I pressed stop and held it in my palm. Her voice, her threats, her lies, they were all captured now. I whispered to the silence. You wanted me to sign, Patricia. Instead, you signed your own downfall. The fire inside me blazed brighter than ever. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. It was late when I heard the knock on my door. Not the firm, confident knock of someone with purpose, but the uneven, dragging sound of a man weighed down by more than he could carry. When I opened it, David stood there, his shirt untucked, his tie loosened, his eyes bloodshot. The smell of whiskey clung to him like a second skin. "Mom," he said, voice breaking. He hadn't called me that in months. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize him. I stepped aside, and he stumbled into the living room. He collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. The silence stretched until I heard the sound of his shoulders shaking. A grown man, my son-in-law, unraveling like a boy too tired to hide his tears. I sat across from him, waiting. Finally, he lifted his head, his face wet, his words spilling out in jagged bursts. "We're drowning, Kathleen. The business, it's gone. The loans, the credit cards, every dollar is already spoken for. And Patricia..." He stopped, swallowing hard. "Patricia promised she could rescue us, but every time I let her in deeper, I feel the walls closing tighter. I fear it's a trap. I fear she'll crush me." The confession hit me harder than I expected. My instinct was to reach out, to lay a hand on his shoulder, but I held back. My heart ached with pity, yet my mind stayed sharp. This was the same man who had dismissed my warnings, who had told me Patricia understood finances while I apparently didn't. Now he sat here, stripped of pride, begging for air, while the water closed over his head. I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. "David, why didn't you tell me sooner?" He laughed bitterly, rubbing his eyes. "Because I was ashamed. You've always been steady, careful, the kind of person who knows the value of $1. And me? I gambled it away on a dream I couldn't build. I thought Patricia was my answer. She paid off one debt, bought gifts for the kids, made Kayla feel safe, but her kindness has strings, and I can't cut them." The words poured out of him now, broken and raw. I thought I was protecting Kayla. I thought I was saving her from seeing me fail. But every time Patricia smiled, every time she pulled another check from her purse, I knew I was trading pieces of myself. And now I've traded too much. For the first time, I saw him not as the smug son-in-law who always thought he knew better, but as a man trapped in a cage he had built with his own hands. He wasn't blameless. He wasn't innocent. But he was human. And in that moment, I felt something unexpected, compassion. I spoke carefully. "David, listen to me. Patricia doesn't give without taking. She has already shown her hand. She doesn't just want your gratitude. She wants your loyalty, your dependence. And in the end, she wants control of everything you and Kayla touch, including my house." He looked up at me, his eyes wide, his lips trembling. "She told me the house was the only way out, that if you signed, we'd finally breathe again. Kathleen, I don't want to ask you for it. I swear I don't. But she's made me believe it's the only chance." I let the silence sit heavy between us. The fire crackled in the hearth, throwing shadows across his face. I could see the boy inside him, the one who wanted to make his father proud, the one who thought money could fix weakness. Finally, I said, "David, I will not sell this house, not because I don't care about you, but because this house is the last line Patricia cannot cross. If I give it up, she wins. And then you, Kayla, even your children, you'll all be nothing more than her property." He broke then, leaning forward, his hands covering his face. I know you're right, but I don't know how to stop her. She has the money, the influence, the way of making Kayla believe everything she says. And me, I'm too weak." I rose from my chair and stood over him, my voice steady, each word sharp as glass. "You are not too weak unless you choose to be. You made mistakes. You let her buy pieces of you, but you still have a choice, David. You can tell the truth. You can stop being her pawn, or you can keep drowning and drag Kayla down with you." He looked up at me, eyes red, but there was a flicker of something else there now. Fear, yes. Shame, yes. But also the faintest glimmer of resolve. "I don't know if I can fight her," he whispered. "Then let me fight," I said firmly. "But when the time comes, you stand with me. That is all I ask." He nodded slowly, broken, but listening. His shoulders sagged, but for the first time that night, the sobs stopped. He leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling as though searching for air. I turned back to the fire, my heart heavy, but certain. David's confession had given me clarity. Patricia's grip was stronger than I thought, but she wasn't invincible. And now I had proof, not on paper, but in David's own trembling words, that her promises were nothing more than chains. As the clock struck midnight, I whispered to myself, "She thinks she owns them, but soon she'll learn the cost of underestimating me." The cafe smelled of roasted beans and burnt sugar, the kind of place where people met for quiet conversations. I chose the booth in the corner, my back against the wall, where I could watch every movement without being watched myself. I had arrived early, recorder already pinned beneath my cardigan, the red light hidden but alive. My tea sat untouched, steam curling into the air as I rehearsed the lines in my head. Tonight would not be about emotions. Tonight would be about precision. When Patricia arrived, she filled the room as if it were a stage built for her. Fur draped over her shoulders, her jewelry catching the light. She slid into the booth opposite me, her smile wide and practiced. "Kathleen?" she said warmly, though her eyes were knives. This feels almost like a truce. Two women sharing coffee instead of tension. I folded my hands on the table, meeting her gaze without flinching. Truce is one word, test is another. Her smile didn't falter, but a shadow crossed her face. She leaned back, crossing her legs, tilting her head with mock amusement. You're jealous, Kathleen. That's all this has ever been. Jealous that Kayla comes to me, jealous that David trusts me, jealous that I still know how to matter. I let her words land, but I didn't bite. My voice was even, cutting through her performance. Jealousy doesn't explain forged signatures. The air shifted. Her smile stiffened, the color in her cheeks rising. Excuse me? I leaned in slightly, my tone quiet but sharp. You heard me. Documents with my name, my address, my late husband's pension. Not written by me, not signed by me. Yet there they are, floating in your tidy little folder. For a split second, her mask cracked. Her fingers twitched against the table, nails tapping once, twice, before she caught herself. You weren't supposed to see those. The words slipped out before she could cage them. My recorder caught every syllable. I sat perfectly still, as though nothing had happened, but inside I felt the steel settle deeper in my bones. I said softly, So they exist. Thank you for confirming. Patricia's eyes widened. Her voice rose, sharp, a hiss breaking through the calm of the cafe. You set me up. The couple in the booth behind us turned slightly, curious. Patricia noticed and lowered her tone, her smile snapping back into place. She leaned forward, whispering through her teeth. You have no idea what you're doing, Kathleen. I have friends who can bury you with paperwork. I can make the house disappear, with or without your signature. I let her lean close, then answered with icy calm. You don't scare me. What scares me is the thought that my daughter and grandchildren are tangled in your web. That's why I'm here, to pull them out. Her eyes narrowed. And you think you can? I don't think. I know. She let out a brittle laugh, the kind meant to cover panic. You're nothing but a lonely widow clinging to old walls and old photographs. You don't have the power to fight me. I held her gaze, unblinking. Power doesn't come from money, Patricia. It comes from truth. And tonight, you've given me enough truth to bring you down. Her hand froze midair as she reached for her coffee cup. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked unsure. She blinked, searching for the mask she had dropped, scrambling to put it back on. I pressed the advantage. Ethan, I said quietly. Her head jerked up, the color draining from her face. What did you say? I repeated, slow and deliberate. Ethan, your son. The one you told everyone didn't exist. Her lips parted, her breath catching. Rage and fear flickered across her features before she smoothed them away. But it was too late. My recorder had caught that crack as well. She tried to recover, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. You think bringing up Ethan will save you? That boy has nothing to do with this. On the contrary, I replied, my tone like a blade. He has everything to do with it, because once the police hear your name alongside his, they'll connect the rest. The debts, the forged papers, the lies. She pushed back from the table, her chair scraping loudly against the tile. Her eyes burned into me, no longer able to pretend. You will regret crossing me, Kathleen. I stood slowly, calm as stone. No, Patricia, you will regret underestimating me. I left the cafe first, my steps steady, my heart racing beneath my cardigan. I could feel the recorder pressing against my chest, warm from the heat of the room, heavy with the weight of her confession. That night I walked home beneath the streetlights, the cold air biting my cheeks, but I felt nothing but fire. Patricia had tried to play me, tried to paint me as jealous, as irrelevant, but she had lost her balance. And now I had her words, her slip, her fury, her denial, all captured forever. The dining room was heavy with silence when I called everyone together. The table was set, candles flickering, plates untouched. Kayla sat to my left, her fork resting uselessly beside her plate. David sat across, eyes down, his fingers drumming nervously against the wood. And at the head of the table, Patricia reclined in her chair, fur still draped across her shoulders as though she were royalty. I waited until the last chair scraped into place, until every pair of eyes, willing or unwilling, was fixed on me. Then I set the stack of papers on the table. The sound echoed louder than I expected, sharp, deliberate. "What's this?" Patricia asked lightly, though her smile was already tight. "Truth," I answered, my voice calm but cutting. From my cardigan pocket, I drew out the small recorder. I placed it beside the papers, its black surface gleaming under the candlelight. For a moment, no one moved. I pressed play. Patricia's voice filled the room, clear and sharp, captured exactly as it had been in the cafe. "You weren't supposed to see those." The air shifted instantly. Kayla's head snapped toward Patricia, her eyes wide. David's hands froze mid-tap, his face blanching. Patricia's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, laughing too loudly. "This is nonsense," she said, waving a hand. "Anyone can edit a recording. Kathleen is twisting things." I let her laugh echo before pressing play again. Her voice spilled into the room once more, sharper this time. "If you want your daughter's life to stay comfortable, you'll stop asking so many questions." Kayla covered her mouth. Her eyes shimmered with betrayal, confusion, fear. David lowered his gaze further, shoulders sagging. I leaned forward, steady. "Forgery, manipulation, lies. All in your own words, Patricia." Patricia slammed her hands against the table, making the glasses rattle. "Without me, you'd all collapse. David would be bankrupt. Kayla would be homeless. I am the reason this family stands at all." Kayla's voice cracked as she whispered, "Is that true?" David finally lifted his head, tears glistening. His voice was hoarse. "She bailed me out, but she used it to control us. She wanted everything in return." Kayla's hand trembled as she reached for his, but her eyes never left Patricia. "You told me you did it out of love." Patricia sneered, her mask gone now, her voice dripping venom. "Love? Love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't buy cars, or clear debts, or keep you in that Lexus. I gave you stability. Patricia jabbed a finger toward me, her nails gleaming under the light. "She gave you nothing." My voice was low, steady, each word weighted. "I gave her life. I gave her years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of meals skipped so she could eat. You can try to erase that, Patricia, but truth cannot be forged." The recorder clicked off, silence falling heavy again. Kayla's tears spilled now, silent trails down her cheeks. David held his head in his hands. Patricia breathed hard, her chest rising and falling, eyes darting around the table like a cornered animal. "If I walk away, you'll have nothing," she spat. "Nothing!" I stood slowly, gathering the papers, sliding the recorder into my pocket. "No, Patricia, when you walk away, we'll finally have everything, because we'll have freedom from you." The words hung in the air, final and unshakable. For the first time, Patricia looked small. The fur on her shoulders seemed ridiculous, her jewels garish under the soft glow of the candles. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Kayla's voice, trembling but firm, broke the silence. "Get out!" Patricia whipped her head toward her, eyes wild. "Kayla, I said get out!" Kayla's voice rose, louder, stronger, filled with all the betrayal of years suddenly revealed. Patricia pushed back from the table, her chair scraping across the floor, and stormed toward the door. Her heels struck the wood with angry rhythm. But before she left, she turned back, her voice sharp as glass. "You'll regret this." The door slammed, the sound echoing through the house. I exhaled slowly, the tension breaking at last. Kayla sobbed into her hands, and David leaned into her, his face pale and worn. I stood over them, not triumphant, but resolute. The truth has been spoken, and nothing will be the same again. Thanksgiving morning dawned cold and sharp, the kind of morning where every sound carries farther than usual. I woke early, long before the neighborhood stirred, and placed a small, wrapped box outside Kayla and David's front door. The paper was plain brown, tied with a simple ribbon. No sparkle, no bow, no flourish. Just wait. Inside was the gift they would never forget. I returned home quietly, my steps light against the frost. The box sat waiting in the pale morning sun, innocent to anyone passing by. But I knew what was inside. Copies of Patricia's forged papers, a USB drive with her recorded admissions, and at the very top, a sealed envelope addressed to Ethan Chen. By mid-morning, I heard the chaos. Kayla's scream shattered the calm, a sound sharp enough to slice through walls. I imagined her barefoot at the doorway, tearing at the ribbon, pulling the lid open, and seeing the truth stare back at her. From across the street, David's voice carried low and panicked. "No, no, this can't be!" His words cracked into silence, heavy with dread. Patricia's heels clicked frantically against the wood as she rushed forward. I could picture her snatching the papers with clawed fingers, her face whitening as she saw her own handwriting staring back at her, undeniable, permanent. She froze. For once, she had no lines rehearsed, no polished smile to cover the terror rising in her throat. Kayla's voice broke the air again, ragged, wounded. "Mom! Why? How could you?" Patricia tried to speak, her words stumbling. Those are fake. Lies. She's twisting everything." But David cut her off, his voice shaking, his face pale. "No, Patricia. This is your signature. I recognize it. And the USB, we all heard you last night." He slumped against the doorway, his head in his hands. The man who had once defended Patricia now stood stripped of denial. Kayla's sobs grew louder, echoing across the yard. She clutched the envelope with Ethan's name trembling in her fingers. "You told me you had no family. You told me I was all you had." Patricia lunged for the envelope, panic flashing in her eyes. "Give that to me." But Kayla pulled back, her tears blurring her vision. "You lied to me. You lied to all of us." I stood at my window, watching from a distance, my hands folded calmly around a cup of tea. The scene played out exactly as I intended. Patricia wasn't just cornered. She was undone by her own words, her own schemes. The neighbors began to gather, drawn by the screams. Faces appeared behind curtains, whispers carried in the cold air. Patricia's carefully built image, her grandeur, her generosity, her false benevolence, crumbled under the weight of public humiliation. She screamed then, loud and guttural, her voice stripped of polish. "Without me, you'd all collapse. You'd be nothing without me." Her words rang desperate, unhinged. Kayla staggered back, horror painted across her face. David's shoulders shook, not with anger, but with the crushing weight of truth. The box lay open at their feet, its contents spilling like a confession too loud to ignore. Every forged document, every copied lie, every shred of the empire Patricia tried to weave now turned against her. I whispered softly to Tom's picture on the mantel, "That's my gift to them. Not revenge. Truth." Inside me, something settled. The scarf and the $5, once symbols of humiliation, had transformed into weapons of clarity. They pushed me to fight, to strike not with anger, but with precision. And now the fight was won. Kayla's cries softened into silence. She stood frozen, staring at the mess on her doorstep, the reality of who Patricia was sinking into her bones. David finally whispered, almost to himself, "We trusted the wrong person." Patricia stood trembling, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. But she could not run from what lay at her feet. The truth was louder than her screams, stronger than her control. I took a slow sip of tea, my lips firm but calm. The morning air carried every sound across the street, and with each cry, each denial, each broken voice, I knew this was the real Thanksgiving gift. Not the Lexus, not the champagne, not the hollow celebrations. The real gift was freedom, from lies, from manipulation, from Patricia's poison. And I had delivered it, neatly wrapped in brown paper, placed at their door for the whole world to see. Spring sunlight poured gently across the porch as I sat in my rocking chair, a cup of tea warming my hands. The months since Thanksgiving had been quieter, freer. Patricia had disappeared from our lives after the truth came crashing down, her schemes too exposed to repair. The Lexus still sat in the driveway, but it was no longer a symbol of triumph. It was an expensive reminder of misplaced loyalty. I looked out over the yard Tom and I had tended together for decades. The grass grew greener now, the flowers beginning to bloom, and for the first time in years, I felt peace in every corner of the home I had almost lost. The screen door creaked, and Kayla stepped out, her eyes red-rimmed though she tried to smile. She crossed the porch quickly and bent to hug me, her arms trembling around my shoulders. "I almost lost you," she whispered, her voice catching. I placed my hand on her back, steady and calm. "No, Kayla, you almost lost yourself." She pulled back, her tears spilling now. I thought I was protecting us, leaning on Patricia, but all I did was push you away. I can't believe I let her. Her words trailed into silence. I took a sip of tea before answering, my tone firm but gentle. Family isn't about cars or money. It's about loyalty. It's about standing with each other when the world feels heavy. Patricia bought your trust with glitter and gifts, but loyalty cannot be purchased. Her chin trembled as she nodded, wiping her cheeks. "You were right, Mom. I see it now. David sees it too. We're going to rebuild, together, without her, without lies." I studied her face. The same face I had watched grow from childhood to womanhood. The same eyes that once trusted me above all. There was pain there, but also clarity. Patricia's poison had broken something, but it had also revealed the truth. "Then rebuild," I said softly. "But remember, stability isn't built on money, it's built on honesty. And honesty begins here in this family." David stepped onto the porch then, his posture heavy with humility. He looked at me, eyes lowered, voice low. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to earn it if you'll let me." I held his gaze for a long moment. "You don't earn forgiveness with words, David. You earn it with choices. Show my daughter you can stand without leaning on false promises. Show me you can protect what truly matters." He nodded quickly, his throat tight. "I will." The three of us sat there for a while in silence, the wind rustling through the trees, birds chirping faintly in the distance. It wasn't perfect, but it was healing. And sometimes, healing was enough. Later that evening, after they had gone inside, I returned to the mantelpiece. There lay the wrinkled scarf and the $5 bill, placed neatly beside Tom's photograph. I stared at them for a long time. Once they had humiliated me, symbols of how small my own daughter's love had become, but now they had transformed into something else. The scarf was no longer an insult. It was a reminder of my endurance, of how far I was willing to go to protect the truth. The $5 were no longer a mockery. They were a symbol that even the smallest, weakest offering can spark a revolution if placed in the right hands. I touched the photo frame gently. Tom's steady eyes seemed to watch me, just as they always had. "We won, Tom," I whispered, not with anger, not with revenge, but with truth. The flames in the fireplace flickered low, casting a warm glow across the scarf and the bill. What had once been marks of humiliation now stood as trophies of quiet victory. As I turned away, I carried my tea back to the porch, watching the sun sink behind the trees. The world outside moved on. Children played in the street, neighbors chatted at their fences. But inside me, a calm certainty settled. This battle was over, and though scars remained, peace had returned. My story was not one of revenge, but of resilience. And I hoped, somewhere out there, someone listening would promise themselves never to treat their parents as disposable, never to forget that true wealth lies in love and loyalty. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes, letting the wind brush against my face. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole.